A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Chapter 7, Part 3. Eliza, the second daughter of Mary and Thomas, lacked the prettiness and fire of her three sisters. She was plain and dull and indifferent to life. Mary, wanting to give one of her daughters to the church, decided that Eliza was the one. Eliza entered a convent at 16. She chose a very rigid order of nuns. She was never permitted to leave the convent walls except on the occasion of her parents' death. She took the name of Ursula, and as Sister Ursula, she became an unreal legend to Francie. Francie saw her once when she came out of the convent to attend Thomas Rommelly's funeral. Francie was 9 at the time. She had just made her first communion and had given herself so wholeheartedly to the church that she thought she might be a nun when she grew up. She awaited Sister Ursula's coming with excitement. Just think of it, an aunt who was a nun. What an honor. But when Sister Ursula stooped to kiss her, Francie saw that she had a fine fringe of hair on her upper lip and chin. This frightened Francie into believing that hair grew on the faces of all nuns who entered the convent at a tender age. Francie decided against sisterhood. Evie was the third Rommelly girl. She too had married young. She married Willie Flitman, a handsome black-haired man with a silky mustache and liquid eyes like an Italian. Francie thought that he had a very comical name, and she laughed to herself every time she thought of it. Flitman wasn't much good. He wasn't exactly a bum. He was just a weak man who whined all the time. But he played the guitar. Those Rommelly women had a weakness for any kind of man who was by way of being a creator or a performer. Any kind of musical, artistic, or storytelling talent was wonderful to them, and they felt it their duty to nurture and guard these things. Evie was the refined one of the family. She lived in a cheap basement flat on the fringes of a very refined neighborhood and studied her betters. She wanted to be somebody, wanted her children to have advantages she never had. She had 3 children, a boy named after his father, a girl named Blossom, and another boy called Paul Jones. Her first step towards refinement was to take her children out of the Catholic Sunday school and put them into the Episcopal Sunday school. She had gotten it into her head that Protestants were more refined than Catholics. Evie, loving talent in music and lacking it herself, sought for it avidly in her children. She hoped that Blossom would like to sing and that Paul Jones would like to play the fiddle and little Willie the piano. But there was no music in the children. Evie took the bull by the horns. They would have to love music whether they wanted to or not. If talent wasn't born in them, maybe it could be shoved into them at so much per hour. She bought a second-hand fiddle for Paul Jones and negotiated lessons for him at 50 cents an hour from a man who called himself Professor Algretto. He taught little Flitman fearsome scrapings, and at the end of the year gave him a piece called Humoresque. Evie thought it was wonderful when he got a piece to play. It was better than playing the scales all the time. Well, a little better. Then Evie got more ambitious. "Bein'," she said to her husband, "that we got the fiddle for Paul Jones, little Blossom could take lessons too, and both could practice on the same fiddle." "At different times, I hope," replied her husband sourly. "What do you think?" she answered indignantly. So 50 cents more a week was scraped up and folded into Blossom's reluctant hand, and she was sent off to take fiddle lessons too. It so happened that Professor Algretto had a very slight peculiarity concerning his girl pupils. He made them take off their shoes and stockings and stand in their bare feet on his green carpet while they sawed away. Instead of beating time or correcting their fingering, he spent the hour in a reverie, staring at their feet. Evie was watching Blossom get ready for her lesson one day. She noticed that the child removed her shoes and stockings and washed her feet carefully. Evie thought that was commendable, but a little strange. "And why do you wash your feet now?" "For my fiddle lessons." "You play with your hands, not your feet." "I feel ashamed standing in front of the professor with dirty feet." "He can see through your shoes, maybe." "I don't think so, because he always makes me take my shoes and stockings off." This made Evie jump. She knew nothing of Freud, and her scanty knowledge of sex did not include any of its deviations. But her common sense told her that Professor Algretto should not charge 50 cents an hour and not attend to his work. Blossom's musical education was terminated then and there. Upon being questioned, Paul Jones said that he had never been asked to take anything off but his hat when he went for his lesson. He was allowed to continue. In 5 years, he could play the fiddle almost as well as his father, who had never taken a lesson in his life, could play the guitar. Aside from his music, Uncle Flitman was a dull man. At home, his only topic of conversation was the way Drummer, the milk wagon horse, treated him. Flitman and the horse had been feuding for 5 years, and Evie hoped that one of them would get to the decision soon. Evie really loved her husband. She could not resist mimicking him. She'd stand in the Nolan kitchen and pretend she was the horse Drummer, and then she'd give a good imitation of Uncle Flitman trying to put the feed bag on the horse. The horse is standing at the curb like this. Evie leaned over until her head was hanging at her knees. Will comes along with the feed bag. He's just about to put it on, and up goes the horse's head. Here Evie would jerk her head high and whinny like a horse. Will waits. The horse's head goes down again. You'd think he'd never get it up in the air. The horse makes out like he's got no bones. Evie's head lolled alarmingly. Comes Will with the feed bag. Up goes the head. Then what happens? Asked Francie. I go down and put the feed bag on the horse. That's what happens. Does he let you? Does he let me? Evie reported to Katie, then turned to Francie. Why, he runs up on the sidewalk to meet me and sticks his head in the feed bag before I can lift it up even. Does he let me? She murmured indignantly. She turned to Katie. You know, Kate, sometimes I think my man is jealous of the way the horse Drummer likes me. Katie stared at her a moment with her mouth open. Then she started to laugh. Evie laughed and Francie laughed. The two Rommelly girls and Francie, who was half Rommelly, stood there laughing about a secret they shared concerning the weakness of a man. Those were the Rommelly women. Mary, the mother, Evie, Sissy, and Katie, her daughters, and Francie, who would grow up to be a Rommelly woman even though her name was Nolan. They were all slender, frail creatures with wondering eyes and soft, fluttery voices, but they were made of thin, invisible steel.